Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot-Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the A&G Draft strategy. And in this podcast, I have a guest on to review our 2024-2025 season bets and see what we can learn from these storylines that changed the betting and fantasy landscape during the season. Let's get it. Welcome on in, everyone. My guest today is Ryan Brudner, R33 in the Apples and Ginos Discord, or Top Cheddar Fantasy on Twitter. Ryan was one of the writers for the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Draft Guide this past season, and just generally, I think he's a very sharp guy who runs a little bit more on the betting side of fantasy, so he has a little bit different of a lens to approach just looking at NHL outcomes, player outcomes in general, and I think that's valuable, even if you're not personally into betting. I think looking at it from this kind of lens is actually pretty instructive for how you might want to view your fantasy teams. So, without further ado, let's bring him in. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me. Happy to be back and happy to get into how the season went.
Yeah. Well, the rumors have it, Ryan, that you will be attending the Toronto Maple Leafs Game 7. Can you confirm or deny?
Oof, I can confirm. Definitely took a little bit out of my winnings to do that, and definitely staying away from all the bets on that game.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to be double sweating a game like that, that's for sure. But
Yeah.
hopefully the Leafs don't rip your heart out and stomp on it the way that they've done for so many years past. But yeah, we'll just leave it at that, I think.
Yeah. I have some naive hope over here.
Right.
I have to if I'm going.
I think all Leaf fans, as much as we want to deny it, we still cling on to that little bit of naivete and believe that somehow, some way, this year is different every single year. Anyway, enough about the Leafs. Let's get into the topic, talking about the 2024-25 season that was for betting purposes. So we'll just start off with a little bit of how it went for us, our overall betting record. So for myself, only did season-long stuff. I didn't dabble really in any of the daily, shot props or goal props or anything like that. So on the season, I netted myself a cool 3.95% return. Big money right there. I do still have one bet active. I picked actually on this podcast that I did with Ryan back before the season. I picked Dallas to win the cup at plus 1100. And that's not looking too terrible at this point in time. Well, obviously, they haven't closed the deal with Winnipeg as of this recording. I think they started that game already, if I'm not mistaken. But we will see how that goes. If that hits, that's obviously be a pretty nice feather in my cap. That'd be an extra 12 units there. So add something to my return. But either way, just kind of a fun entrance for me into the betting world. Didn't lose money, which is pretty much the goal for me this year. So that feels good. But enough about me. Let's talk to the professional here. Let's talk to Ryan about his betting record. Take it away, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks. And hey, if you didn't lose money in your first year of really going on season longs, that's great. I think I lost money my first year, so there's that. This year though, 30% return on all my total season longs, which
Nice.
I'm very happy with, and was actually the almost exactly the same return as I had last year. So those are good signs for me to continue doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in terms of daily betting, I bet on hockey almost every night, and I set my bankroll to start at the season, and then some smart bet sizing there, not to blow through it all.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, over all that time, the whole season, my my return was 147% on that starting bankroll. So if I started with 100 units, let's say $100, I now have 247 units after betting almost every night. And that's many, many hours put in and a lot of
Yeah,
big swings, a lot of big losses and big wins. So it's not for
right.
everyone and definitely takes some time. Um, but in terms of the season long betting, I think 30% is reasonable for using like any good projections and putting in some minimal time. I think that is reasonable, especially your projections. I know you did a recap on yours compared to a few others, and I do think yours were maybe a little better than a few others, if I recall. And I used my own, but I think if you used yours and did some similar bet sizing to me, you probably would have returned similar to what I did.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get into some of the specifics here and some of the takeaways. Definitely for myself, this being my first year, I have some ideas on some spots where I probably went wrong. Some of that also, I just didn't have that many bets in total. So, where I went wrong, it affected me more, I think, just because I didn't have that sheer volume of bets too. So, we'll get into some of that here. Before we really dig in on the specifics here, I just want to disclaim once again, we're not really providing betting advice here. Um, we're just two guys who kind of enjoy this aspect of fantasy. Ryan's found it obviously pretty profitable in the long run. So if you want to tail him, you can do that. And you probably do okay on anything that he's presenting to you. But definitely, we're not saying that anything that we tell you, any props that we tell you here in the future, any advice here is not betting advice as such. You should probably expect to lose what you put in, and if you make money, that's great. That's kind of how I approached it this year, and how I think you probably should approach it. That being said, like I do think there is some money to be made in some of these NHL bets in particular. I don't think it's like a focus necessarily for these sports books compared to the bigger markets, like football, obviously much bigger in the States specifically. So I don't think I don't think they've solved the projections quite as well on the NHL as some of the other sports, and so I do think there is something to that. It's maybe a fun place to park some money for the year, get your takes in before the season starts, and hopefully not lose too much money either. So let's dig into it though. Let's get into first the bets that we made on this podcast back before the season started, episode 353. If anyone wants to go back and check that out, but for myself, we kind of went through a few different things like points props, goal props. We took like a Stanley Cup winner, average time on ice leader, who would win the some specific awards, stuff like that was what we took on here. So for myself, this ended up being 26 units that I put in on the props that I talked about on the pod, and of those, I returned 23.87 units. So I dropped 2.13 units in total on the specific calls that I made on the podcast here. Uh, I'm not going to dig into every single one here. Marner being over 91.5 points felt really easy. I put 4 units on that. It was minus 114 on FanDuel. So obviously, you're not getting plus money or anything crazy on that. But as just a straight over under, that one felt pretty straightforward. A couple other over unders that didn't go so well for me. Timo Meyer, I took the over on 58.5. Put 3 units on that. That obviously didn't come through as Sheldon Keefe banished Timo Meyer to the Shadow Realm for basically the entire year. Andrei Svechnikov, I took the over on 23.5 goals. He saved all of his goal scoring for the playoffs, which is really unfortunate for me this year. And then PLD under 58.5 points, and he went over that, which I'm sure Blake is gleefully crowing about somewhere right now as we speak. So yeah, those were the biggest ones. I guess I could throw in two. I had Tyler Toffoli under 30.5 goals. He had like it felt like nearly a perfect season in San Jose, considering how bad that team was last year. The rookies came in, the rookies were good basically immediately for San Jose, and he still missed on the 30.5 goals. So that one felt like a pretty solid bet at the time too, and obviously came through. So I'll pitch it over to you, Ryan. Any of those that you think look better or worse in hindsight, or any that you were also on?
I just want to say, Kucherov for the Rocket, you were looking real good at the start of the season there,
Yeah,
and
at the start it looked really nice.
yeah, maybe you could have cashed out for some good money there, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
should have
I don't know
looked.
if you had those options, but um, yeah, like I was with you on Tage. Definitely was on all over Tage. I was also with you on Pierre-Luc Dubois. So Blake, you were right, we were wrong. We'll say that. um,
I would never say it to his
Also,
face.
yeah. Toffoli, yeah, like that was a good line. I got him at 32 and a half goals. I took the under. I think
Nice.
it started to move by the time you started looking at things. I
Mhm.
think it ended at like a few books had him at 29 and a half. He finished
Mhm.
with 30. So we're
Yeah.
lucky we got in early. But that's just like a point to pay attention to the lines early and
Mhm.
really like Toffoli wasn't gonna go off. He was close, he was close, but he
Yeah.
wasn't gonna go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the Tage one you're alluding to there, 40 plus goals. I had that at plus 340. I had 2 units on that, and obviously that one hit. The other two hits I had, Joseph Wall under 27.5 wins. That one felt pretty crazy to me from the start. Like, it really did seem like they were trying to go to a tandem there. They pretty much did that, and it really took a Stolar's injury for Wall to even get close to this number. I think he ended with 25, maybe. Am I misremembering that? Now I'm going to have to look it up because I said it out loud. He ended up with, where are the wins in this? 27. Oh, so he's only one off in the end. But yeah, it did take some Stolar's injury for that to come through, so to make it close in the end. And then Detroit Red Wings, I took the under on 90.5, and they came out to 86 points on the season. And even that, like, they fired the coach that I was viewing as much of the problem and relatively early on. And so they made a bit of a rise after that, but they were so bad early on in the season that I do think that one was a decent line there. Yeah, really the other ones, like the long shots, like the Kucherov one you alluded to, plus 5,000. That one was mostly just for fun. Rasmus Dahlin for Norris, plus 1,500. I had Matt Boldy for 100 plus points, plus 3,000. I had Brock Faber as the average time on ice leader, plus 1,100. And then I have the Dallas Stanley Cup at plus 1,100. So, yeah, I mean, if the Dallas Stanley Cup one comes through, that obviously pays for the other long shots there. But realistically, the long shots are long shots for a reason. You can't really be expecting to hit on all those all the time. But if you do sprinkle in a few of those with some lower capital invested, if you hit on one of them, that can actually be a nice way to add yourself something there. Let's flip over
Yeah.
to you then, Ryan, and you can kind of take us through how the bets that you made on the podcast fared for you.
Yeah, for sure. I want to say Boldy, maybe one day he'll hit 100 plus, and his odds will maybe be similar next year. So
That's true.
it might be a nice long shot for next season.
Might run it back again.
Yeah. Yeah, I also want to point out, anytime, like me and Nate, we both made many more bets than this, but these were the ones we picked for the
Right.
podcast. Anytime you take, a small sample out of the big population of all of our bets, you're going to introduce some variance, some error that occurs, and we both lost money on these, and that's fine because we only picked a few. So
Mm-hmm.
I put I think around 18 and a half units on all of these that I brought onto the podcast. uh, I lost 1.08 units total on them. Not bad. And a lot of them were fun, which was fun to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's go through a few of them. Stars, that was, I just thought that line was a little incorrect and low. They cleared that with ease.
Mm-hmm.
Allmark, I had a lot more faith in Allmark this season. Goalies, they're voodoo, but I like to think I have an idea of what a goalie's going to do, but maybe not. Allmark did finish with 25, so I was only off by one.
Yeah, and there was
But he did
injury there
battle.
too.
Yeah, battled some injuries, which you got to take into account. But I think the backups earned a few more starts than I expected this season with Forsberg and the rookie Marilainen.
Yeah.
He had a nice hot streak for Ottawa there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Yegor Sharangovich, that was a bad call. I thought he would be a fixture on power play one, top line. I had him on the over, but then shortly after our initial podcast, it was announced that he was going to miss the start of the season with an injury, and all the books that I was on, they had the same line, so I was able to go on there and take the unders there. So I'm including that here because it was a part of the podcast, and
Yeah.
I actually won some money on Sharon Govich this season. I gotta say, Matthew Nyes, I was dead wrong. Crazy development this year. He's turned into a real stud, and I'll just say I was wrong. I thought, there's no way he can improve his deployment, and his rate stats weren't as great. He's already playing with Matthews and Marner. He's already doing great things. He's not going to get on power play one. Well, he got on power play one, and he improved in just about everything. So I was wrong on that.
Yeah.
I will
I
say
think.
though, yeah,
No, go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll jump in.
I gotta say, with all the hype that's surrounding him, if his points line next year is in the high 60s, I'm gonna have to take the under again, and we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might be valid too. Yeah, I think with Nyes, I this isn't one that I would like read too much into, like just totally misread this. Like there wasn't a lot in the underlying stats to suggest that a jump was coming as soon as this year. The one thing you might be able to say is, new coach in town, there's a better chance that maybe he loves Nyes in a way that previous coach did not. So maybe you can say something there. But again, like the Leafs have the core four, and they're called the core four for a reason. Those guys are the guys who typically get all the minutes, and it wasn't clear that there was room for a fifth person to, take a big step up in minutes that way. And then you have to also kind of shoot the moon where Nyes gets on the power play and is on the power play for much of the season. The Leafs, one of, I think, only two teams that really ran a five forward power play for an extended stretch of time this season, LA Kings being the other. And so you also kind of had to. It felt like a bit of a parlay that had to hit for Nyes to really go off to the extent that he did. Uh, yeah, I think there may be some signs that we could have picked up on the Matthew Nyes under 48.5 here, but I don't think that it's like I don't think that you have to like throw out everything you were thinking and like say I have to reevaluate my whole process just based on the outcome with this player, because I do think there were some factors there. I was also on this line just for one unit, but I was also on this line. And I don't think that I'm going to necessarily be looking at this as instructive for other cases across the league where I'm going to, suddenly be hammering these overs on players that haven't really demonstrated that. Like he both broke out and got a huge bump in minutes and got power play under a new coach. And so that's just a spot where I feel like for myself, I'm probably going to be continuing to take the under more times than not.
Yeah, and that's some good wisdom there. I won't read too much into Nyes. I do think with the new coach, I did use that as an argument against him staying top line. I was like, yeah, Berube,
Yeah.
he's going to be a tough guy and shift him way down the lineup. That was my thinking, and that turned out to not be correct.
Yeah. All right, keep it going.
Yeah, and then we got Artemi Panarin, 30 and a half goals. That I was pretty confident on. I had more than 2 units on that one. Paterka, we got that to hit at over 25 and a half goals. Even with some weird lineup decisions in Buffalo,
Yeah.
I was kind of expecting Paterka, Tage, and Tuck, to remain a top line in Buffalo possibly all season. And that was not the case, but Peterka proved to be skilled enough to put up a bunch of goals up and down the lineup, which was great for me. Yeah, and then we got Brock Faber. He had a real down year after a great 2023, 2024 season. And 55.5 points was just too high of a number for me, so I had to take that. And then we had some of my long shots that were a lot of fun to talk about. Goalies, again, I thought I had a read on UC Saros making a huge bounce back and possibly getting the Vezina this year, but it seems like Saros is not the elite goaltender that he once was. Matthews, something might be off with Matthews. I had him for the Rocket Richard, and he battled some injuries, but he barely. What was his goal total? He didn't get to 40, but he got like 32, I think.
Let's check it out here. It was 33. 33 goals in
33.
67 games.
Just needed one more to get his number. That would have been
Yeah.
cool. 34. Yeah, so that was a big down year. He might be battling an injury. He doesn't look great in the playoffs right now, even though he scored a goal last night to redeem himself a little bit. I'm not confident in him as quite the best goal scorer in the league at the moment anymore. And then another one I want to talk about, Nick Ehlers, 30 plus goals. That was at plus 800, so it was definitely a long shot. I felt real good about Ehlers to break out a little and find time on power play one, which he did. He got the minutes this year, but that just didn't turn into a 30 plus goal or a 70 point season, which I think were some nice long shots in our season long bets. And then I did have a cup winner that I picked on the pod, which was Carolina, because I really liked the odds that I found at the time that were plus 1,600. And so that's still in the running. If that one hits, we can say the pod picks were a success.
Yeah. Yeah, I was definitely in on some of these as well. I took the Ehlers 30 plus goals. I had some layered Ehlers stuff, 60 plus points, 70 plus points. I had the 30 plus goals there as well. I was also in on the Jack Eichel plus 600 for 40 plus goals. It was kind of a weird season where Eichel has a massive season, but like ends up just being like a setup man completely this year instead of shooting the way he did in years past. So that one I don't think we can tear ourselves apart too much for, but definitely made some money off of Eichel this year as well. I had him on the over on 74.5 points, which was a huge smash, and I think I also had him for the 90 plus points. Yeah, plus 410, 90 plus points. So Eichel is a good one as
Nice.
well. Yeah, yeah, when you're picking like the award winners and stuff like that, those are to me just like kind of the fun bets. Like it's so hard to do from before the season. So much can go into it. Matthews, like even though everyone was trying to figure out how Matthews wouldn't win it this year, and it was like basically injury was the only play, like he was still plus 140. So it's not like the books were just like locking in that Matthews was the Rocket Richard winner from the start of the year, right? So it just goes to show you how much variance can go into something like that, even when a guy's viewed like Austin Matthews was at the beginning of the season, like the guy who is going to win it, barring injuries.
Yeah,
So,
and like the plus 140 there, I just really liked those odds where I
yeah.
think a lot of books had them at like minus 120 or minus 115 as like above 50% chance of happening. And then, this one book has plus 140. And if 10 books are saying, higher than 50% chance, and then one book is saying, no, it's only a 43% chance, maybe this one book is wrong. So trying to take advantage of that. But turns out he's just an old man with a bad wrist, maybe.
Yeah, it could be. But in general, like I think that's a decent strategy, right? Like if you're looking across and you're seeing one book is wildly out of line, like that compared to all the other books, probably if you just take that every single time, on the whole, you end up with a profit more often than not. So
Yeah,
good line
and
there.
on the award bets, I think there's something to be said about like in season, rechecking on all those odds, rechecking on the bets you have, and really what you think is going to happen after you evaluate after a month or two. And I was able to take advantage of that in terms of the Rocket. I got Draisaitl at plus 120. I was very confident in that at the
Nice.
time. I think he was up by 5 goals at the time. So I put 4 units on that one.
Nice.
And then what was another one in season? The Hart Trophy as well. We're going to see about that, but I do have a lot on Draisaitl and some on Hellebuck. So
Hmm.
I'm covered there. I
Yeah.
think the awards are definitely a great season long bet to make.
Right. Yeah, that's a good note as well. All right. So outside of the ones that we talked about on the podcast, we obviously, as Ryan said, we did do some other bets as well. And so we're going to kind of just we each pick three of our biggest misses and our biggest hits. And we'll kind of talk through those in the individual player cases that made those happen. Yeah, these might not be the biggest just in terms of units or whatever, but definitely biggest in terms of surprising or really interesting talking points in terms of fantasy and what it meant for both betting and fantasy this season. So for myself, Timo Meyer, 70 plus points. I layered some Meyer stuff similar to what I did with Ehlers. I did a bunch on Meyer. I had Meyer at 70 plus points and 80 plus points. I took the over on his 58.5 points, which was one that I talked about on the pod. And all of it missed basically. This 3 units on 70 plus points at plus 230, I thought was a pretty good line. And realistically, I just think that I wasn't weighing the downside risk. Do I think that in a lot of cases, a guy making 9 million probably does end up on the first power play and therefore has a much better chance to hit this? Yeah, I do. So, like in general, I don't think I'm changing that approach mentally. But I probably didn't have to have this much invested in Timo Meyer up and down throughout the layered bets that I was making. And so it's just a spot where, even though it was a player that I felt really good about at the beginning of the season in the spot that he was in, I didn't need to invest this much of the portfolio overall in the player. And I think that was a big contributing factor on Meyer. On Velarde, number 2, I had him at 30 plus goals. I had 2 units on that one. Felt pretty confident about that one. I think he came out to 36 goals in my preseason projections, if I remember correctly. And so I felt really good about that. And he did pace for over 30 goals. 27 goals in 71 games was his end of season total. So it was definitely a guy that was trending that way until the late season injury takes him out of the lineup. So that one was tough to stomach, but that is something that you have to weigh when thinking about stuff like this, when making these season long bets. Is yeah, the projection might show him for more than that, but even if you're not betting on a specific player to get injured, I like to talk about how I don't really take injuries into account in fantasy, but in fantasy lineups, you have the opportunity to take that player out of your lineup and to put them into an injured spot and to pick somebody else up. In betting like this, you just kind of have to realize that the average NHL player will get injured for, whatever it is, 5 to 10 games over the course of a season. And you kind of have to factor that in when you're taking, especially these overs or these, 30 plus goal lines, as it was in this case with Velarde. So just you have to be cognizant of the fact that that is another way that some of these can go wrong for you. And just be aware that you have to, like, this was a case with Velarde where the projection was high enough for me over and above the 30 plus goal line at plus 500 that I was definitely going to take it. But if it was like a 30 goal projection, I wouldn't have been nearly as hot on this line. I may have thrown something on it, but definitely wouldn't have been 2 units as I did here. And then Kirill Kaprizov over 97.5 points. I had Kaprizov projected for 115 points. Feels like a smash, right? I put 2 units at minus 115 on Kaprizov here. And once again, it's injury with Kaprizov. But also, I want to talk too about these high end outcomes. Like, it is much harder to get to 97.5 points than it is to get to, 58.5 was the Meyer line. That one felt like it should have been a lot easier. Kaprizov basically had to stay healthy for the vast majority of the season. Like, as soon as you're missing, 5 games for a player who has to average whatever this is, like 1.3 points per game to reach an over on a 97.5 line, uh, any games that they miss are kind of doubly magnified there. And so that's one thing as well. Taking the over on these high end numbers does feel like something that's even maybe a little bit more risky to me. Anything that I talked about with these 3 players that you want to pick apart there, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think you have great points, and our big misses are lessons for the future for sure. And I think yeah, anytime you're taking any over for a season long bet, you really have to account for either some past injury history or just randomness. Random healthy players will probably miss some games, so you got to account for
Mm-hmm.
that. And these the Lardy and Kaprizov, on pace. You were right. Kaprizov was on pace for like, I think he played half the season and got 56 points. He was on pace for over 110. Velarde on pace for just over 30, I think. That one hurt. I think I messaged you as soon as they announced he was, week to
Yeah.
week with a few weeks left in the season. We both
Yeah.
had 30 plus goals. But yeah, that happens. And again, that's a good note on some bet sizing too, where you don't want to go all in on a few players because there's randomness, including injuries that really impact things.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'll toss it over to you. Your 3 biggest misses you'd like to talk about.
Yeah. So my first one, it was legitimately my biggest miss in terms of units. This one, I was super confident in. Connor McDavid, best player in the world. Even if he misses, a few games here and there, I was like, he should pace for 140 plus points. But he didn't. He had a down year, which was still insane. I think he got 100 points
Yeah.
in 67
66.
games.
Yeah.
66. So I think I would still be wrong. I don't think he even paced for 128. But yeah, this was a big miss. We'll see what projections have him at for next season, and what books have him at for next season. He's still the best player in the world, and like his ceiling might be 150 points, but there's definitely going to be some bad seasons and some good seasons in there. And it's a lesson for me not to put 5 whole units on one player. And then, yeah, we got Pierre-Luc Dubois. This I was pretty confident in. Someone who's been around the league on a few teams, didn't gel well with some coaches, coming to Ottawa where, it doesn't look like he'll get on power play 1 right away. It doesn't look like he'll have that opportunity, and never been a big shooter. Really, really, all signs were pointing to maybe a 50-point season for Dubois in my eyes, but he had a great season. His teammates shot well. I think his on ice shooting percentage was the highest of his career. And so he was able to pick up plenty of assists. He had a pretty high shooting percentage relative to his career. So he just had a great season. All the things went well. He had a lot of power play 1 time as well, and good for him, and good for Blake. And we were, we doubted Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then, yeah, my third biggest miss here, it was Alex Ovechkin. This was an in-season bet near the end when he was approaching that record. And my thinking on it was, once he gets to 42, once he gets that record, he's going to take some days off. He might get some rest, and there would only be a few games left. Maybe he'll play 1 or 2 of them. And yeah, so he did. He broke the record, I think, with 5 games left. And then he got a game off, just 1 though. And then he got a 43rd goal in the 3rd last game. And in my eyes, I was still like happy about this bet. I'm like, oh yeah, he should take he's gonna take it easy, rest for the playoffs. And then that last game, he got the 44th goal to sink this bet. But good for him, good for the goal scorer. the
Yeah.
great 8. Good job.
Yeah. It's definitely a bit of a heartbreaker at the end of the season. Yeah, I think Washington in general was a really tough poll this year. Probably, I have to assume that the books made money off of Washington as a whole this year. Uh, PLD had to run pretty pure. He plays all 82 games, scores 66 points, so he clears this line by a decent amount, but not like an incredible amount. And as you mentioned, has a 14.8% on ice shooting percentage. Benefits from some huge breakouts from teammates. McMichael has a huge breakout. Protest has a huge breakout. Ovechkin goes nuts on the season. Chikrin is an instant huge upgrade for Washington on the back end. And the team's scoring profile just got instantly raised so much. And I don't think anybody really was predicting that for Washington this year. And that was obviously a huge factor for PLD's success this year. But also hats off to Dubois. He definitely took his play to a different level than we had seen from the previous 2 years from him. And so, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there is something to the mercurial player persona that we should take take note of here, and maybe this is a player that you shouldn't feel confident in projecting or predicting either way in any direction. Maybe there's something there, but overall, I think like he did have to run pretty pure in terms of the Washington as a like team level offensive breakout to get to this number. And plus, he had to play well himself. So, similar to the Nye situation, it did feel like he did kind of have to shoot the moon a bit to get here. But yeah, kudos to him. He made it happen. The McDavid one, yeah, I think that's similar to my Kaprizov one in some respects, right? Where I think, for myself at least, I think I'll just be steering clear of the overs on some of these huge numbers. There's just too much, I think, that can kind of not even necessarily go wrong, but just be if he's, that extra 1% less efficient, plus then he misses 5 games, is it really tough for him to get there again? Just yeah, there's a few different ways that these huge numbers are pretty tough to hit in my eyes. I think that's one that I'm taking away for myself at least.
Yeah, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but those overs, there might be like a sweet spot where if you go for the alternative totals and it's a plus money, like those Ehlers 30 plus
Mm-hmm.
or 70 plus points, or McDavid like 140 plus, if all goes right, go for that plus money, and I'll touch on that a little bit after.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about our biggest hits now. These are the ones we want the people to remember, not the misses. So, Cole Caulfield. This one I was very much interested in Cole Caulfield. He was one of the players I had the most units invested into. He just hits 70 plus points, gets the 70th point in the last game of the season, plays all 82. I had 4 units at plus 290 on that one. So that was a huge hit for me on Caulfield. I also had him for 40 plus goals. He ends with 37. And I think I also had a line on him for 80 plus points. Yeah, I had plus 350 on 80 plus points. Obviously, he doesn't really come close to that one. But suffice it to say, Cole Caulfield was a player that I was definitely in on this year. So it was nice to get the hit on this one at least. Jack Eichel, 90 plus points. Had a unit on that one at plus 410. That one felt really good. I want to go back and check what my projections were on Eichel because I think I had him projected for close to 90 points. So to put a unit down on him at plus 410 really felt like anytime I have a player projected at that and you're getting that kind of plus money, it felt like a pretty good line to take in most cases. And maybe if you can find a few different scenarios like that, then you can really put yourself in a good spot. Yeah, I had Eichel projected at the beginning of the season for 87 points, so not that far off this one. So if you do find yourself in a spot where there are, 4, 5, 6 players that are this close and giving you this kind of plus money, plus 410 or more in some cases, then maybe to layer in a unit across each of those players, that might be a decent way to go about it. We'll see what Ryan has to say about that. And then Alex Tuck, 30 plus goals. I had a unit on that, also at plus 410. And obviously, Alex Tuck had a pretty solid year for Buffalo in the midst of all that turmoil. I felt pretty solid about Tuck. I had some other bets on him as well. Didn't all come through. And I had him plus 500 for 80 plus points, for example. That one didn't come through, but yeah, I had the over on his 23 and a half goals as well. And that one obviously came through. So yeah, Alex Tuck was just felt like a really safe player in a lot of ways. Oh yeah, I also had the over on his 63 and a half points, which came through. So it felt like a really safe player, a player that every coach is going to love in a lot of respects, a guy who blocks pucks and does all the little things right that coaches love. And so I do weight that a little bit, I think. Just players that you feel really confident a coach is going to love and is at least going to get the opportunity to return something for you, whether or not they, are efficient and have line mates who are also playing well and all the rest of it is still a little bit up in the air. But if you can kind of put that one thing in your corner where you're feeling pretty confident that the coach is going to love the player, then that's at least one more reason that you might feel confident about the line. What do you think about my hits here, Ryan?
Yeah, let's remember these. Everybody,
Yeah.
remember these hits. They're yeah, great job. 4 units on Caulfield, that's great. Um, and yeah, like the bet sizing here definitely returned a lot for you. And but it was smart sizing because you were basing it off your projections, which are, I would say one of the best in the industry. And you really, if you're gonna if you're gonna bet on these season long lines and use some of these projections or use your own projections, you really should get to know those projections in terms of what is the person who made those saying? Like, are they saying this might be like the median event that occurs, and there's a lot of occurrences that can go to the side of those, or is this
Mhm.
person saying like, no, I just think I'm taking a gut call on this and saying this
Right.
person's going to do this? That's probably more of a ceiling call, and if that's
Mhm.
in someone's projections, you know, if they're saying Eichel 90 plus or Eichel 100 plus points, and you're seeing a line that's a Eichel 100 plus at like plus 1200, don't put a whole unit on that. That's
Right.
more of a gut call. So I think that's a really good point in using your projections there. So, like my personal projections, I usually place like a floor to ceiling call on the projection
Mhm.
after my adjustments. So I put a number on it, 1 to 10, whether it's I'm calling this ceiling, or if it's a 5, it's close to the median. And for
Right.
Eichel, I had 85 points as actually an 8, so closer to the ceiling. So I didn't I wasn't comfortable taking the 90 plus points with too much money, but I had a little more on Eichel scoring goals this year for some
Mm.
reason. He just turned into an assist man.
Yeah.
But I had him for around 44 goals and 41 assists in the whole season, and he decided to dish out some nice assists this season.
Yeah. Yeah, you did definitely make one of the more distinct transitions into a pass first player this year that we've seen from an elite level player. Um, I I really don't know necessarily what to do with that. I think some of that is the power play and how they develop that power play with Hurdle and Dorofiev as shooters. Um, and to some extent, I don't expect that to change next year, but it could also just be some variance there too, where some of that comes back again next year. I haven't really thought through yet for myself how I'm going to project that, but it will be very interesting to see what the books do with his goal lines for next year.
Yeah, and he was actually a really interesting player to track in my daily props in terms of shot props.
Mm.
Um, because at the start of the season, his shot lines were, 3.5, for the over under for the game. Sometimes it went to 4.5. But he tended to get on the unders, and I made some money getting on his unders this year.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last parts of the season, his line for 2.5, like over under, it was like around plus 100 to get 3 shots on goal for some of these games. And I just, I wouldn't take that. He was always looking for the pass, especially at the end of the season there.
Yeah. Interesting stuff for sure. All right. I'll kick it back over to you. Talk to me about your biggest hits.
Yeah, so very happy about Mr. Lucas Dostal this year. I was, pretty confident in 1,200 saves. I thought if John Gibson's healthy, there's going to be a split. And if Dostal gets half the games, let's say 41 even, that 1,200 number is within reach. He had that the season prior with 44 starts. And so I thought, this is a timeshare, even if Gibson is healthy. And that's a big if, because Gibson has huge injury history. He's never, I don't know about never, but the last 5 years or so, he's always battled some injuries. So I was very happy to take this at plus 1,200. And Dostal hit it in, I think, his like 46th or 47th game. But he ended up playing 54, and I don't know. I think he got, I don't know his save total, but it may have been 1,400, over 1,400.
It
Don't quote me
was
on that one.
1,467 saves.
There you go. So, I mean, I think this was an opportunity to get some even more plus money, but I don't know if they offered that. I don't know if the books would have offered that number there. And then we have Adam Fantilli. I was a little higher on Fantilli in terms of my projections. I definitely didn't project him at 30 goals, but this was, one of his ceiling outcomes. I had a little bit more on his over 21.5 goals. I thought that was pretty safe. Well, not safe, injuries occur. I was pretty confident in Fantilli to score those goals. I was expecting a little bit of a bump in Columbus, and I was expecting Fantilli to get a lot of those minutes. And yeah, he was just on fire in the second half of the season and was able to get to that 30 plus number. So that was a good return for me at plus 1,000. And then yeah, Alex Ovechkin in the preseason, all of my signs were pointing at least a 30 goal season for Ovi. He's chasing the record. He's coming off a really down year where he had one of the lowest shooting percentages of his career. And I just didn't buy the story that Ovi is just old and he's not a good goal scorer anymore. And he had one of his best seasons this past season in terms of shooting percentage. So that was a big hit. I also got his 40 plus goal mark at plus 950 as well, and I had 0.5 units on that. So yeah, I was very happy with Ovi there. Unfortunately, he burned me because I got a little greedy to thread the needle and take his under 44 goals at the end of the season there.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I had Ovechkin projected for 39 goals. I just felt like there was a lot of variance there, and so I didn't end up placing any bets on Ovechkin in particular. I wish I'd seen the over 28.5 though, because that one I definitely would have been in on. I'm surprised. When I saw your Fantilli one, I was like, did I really not have any bets on Fantilli after all I talked about him all off season last year, and I didn't. But yeah, that's definitely one. I had Fantilli projected for 28 goals, so he was in that range at plus 1,000. That's definitely a spot where maybe I wish, and I mean hindsight's 2020, but
and
when
I say that, anyone with some good projections and minimal time can, maybe return 30%. Maybe it's not minimal time because, that Fantilli, I'm scrolling through like these books, all of their lines, I'm like, okay. And then I have my projections in my mind, and then I go to the alternative line. So it's not minimal time. You really have to find all of these lines and really go through everything. And that's a big thing for Fantilli. It's not just like Fantilli wasn't on everyone's mind. They may not just go search for Fantilli, But when I'm scrolling through all the lines, he jumps out at me as someone that I'm higher on.
For sure. All right. Let's keep rolling here. So, one other thing that we did when you're on the podcast before this season is you put together a little line of all the props for a bunch of different players, some interesting ones, and we all collectively, you, me, Blake, Josh, and Mark, 18 skaters, all took the overs and the unders on these lines just to see who could come out on top. We're not going to go through each of them, but it looks like in the end, you and I both had 11 out of these correct. I'm not actually sure how many there are in total. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we had 18 in total. So you and I both had 11 out of 18 correct. Blake had 10 out of 18, and so did Mark, and Josh had 8 out of 18 correct. So that was a fun exercise. The only one that I could find that I was the only person that got right was Tommy Novak, taking the under on 47.5 points there. I don't know what he ended up with, but it was definitely nowhere near the 47.5. He had kind of fell out of favor there, I would say, for sure, in Nashville, and got himself traded. He ended the season with 22 points. Not an ideal season for him, for sure.
Poor Tommy.
Poor Tommy.
uh,
You and Blake had your Sapkowski under on the 24.5, and I took the over there. That was one that you guys got on me for sure. Were there any others that kind of stuck out to you on this one?
Yeah, but well, Matt Rempe was a fun one, and that was
Yeah.
actually offered by a lot of the books, just as a fun player to project and such a low total. My thinking was that he would like not play half the games,
Right.
and he's not that very good at hockey, and he might be suspended for 10 games here and there.
Yeah.
So he did, however, scare me. I was on this line in my real bets. I think I was at 9.5 actually, but the last 4 games, I think he got 2 points in those last 4 games, and I was tracking that, and I was like, oh, is he gonna go on a heater here and make me lose these bets? Yeah, so that was a fun one. But I do want to point out, just like we have some great experts here, and our consensus every I think there were two that we were all aligned on, unanimous: Wyatt Johnston and Braden Point, and those hit. So that's a good sign for consensus picks in the future.
Yep. Braden Point, we all took the under on 44.5 goals, and Wyatt Johnson, 76.5 points. We all took the under as well. And both of those hit. Yeah, the other one, I guess, that stuck out to me, Cutter Gauthier, 44.5. You, me, and Blake and Mark all took the under there, so that one was close to consensus as well. Only Josh went above. And that's just a spot where it felt like Greg Cronin was going to Craig Cronin. Now, Gauthier was good enough that he got to 44 points, so this barely hit. But yeah, again, one that we were pretty close to consensus on.
Yeah, that was another one I was
close.
tracking near the end of the season too, because I was on. I think I had 2.5 units on this line, and if you just looked in the first half of the season, it's like, great, he's on pace for what, 28 points, and then near the end of the season, he started getting more minutes, started getting some power play time, and really had some nice games that scared me. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting player to look at for next season. We'll see what happens with Anaheim for sure.
Yeah. If they're putting up over underlines anywhere close to what he put up this year, and not really accounting for some step next year, definitely think I could be interested in some overs on Cutter Gauthier. All right, let's get into the major takeaways. I'm going to hand over the keys here. Ryan, give us all that knowledge. Start with the daily stuff for us here.
Yeah. So I definitely had some good lessons this year, and I want to share them. So I want to limit the losses of everyone in the future. But I do want to preface that these lessons were for what I did in my betting style, and it might not be the same for everyone. If
Right.
I'm saying that shots on goal was not ideal for me, maybe someone else in the industry had like a career year in shots on goal. So So this is what I learned for me, and yeah, I'll go over it. So yeah, that was the first lesson this year. Shots on goal abnormally was a money loser for me this season overall in terms of daily prop betting. It just seemed like this year was a lot more variable in terms of players, getting 5 shots and then none and then 4 and then 1. That being said, unders were really great for me this year, more than usual. And yeah, it's just an interesting trend that'll make me in the future be a little more cautious on shots on goal in general, and maybe pinpoint a little better on in terms of players that I'm most confident in, rather than going yeah, like my normal style for the season. I tend to bet on every game, um, which is great and fun. I enjoy it. But in terms of shots on goal, near the end of the season, I started to take my wheel off the pedal a bit on that one. Um, other than that, team shots on goal. So like under or over 28 total shots for a team. That one, and goalie saves, which is very similar. That one made me the most money this year on the season. They may be a little less variable in terms of just outcomes that you can read a little better. And then another big lesson for daily betting: be careful of the same game parlays, because some of the calculations that all these books use to give you a final number for your odds, they vary greatly. So a lot of times I liked to pair 2 players playing together to both get a point in a same game parlay, but it really depended on the sportsbook you're using to determine if that's a good bet. Because Matthews and Marner both to get a point, it could be plus 100 on one book, and in another book you put it in and it's minus 170. And so just that was a big lesson there, to really compare between the books in terms of the same game parlay calculations that they're doing.
Did you notice in
And
particular on any one site that was like consistently big minus or consistently on the higher side?
yeah, I so the site that I found was the best ended up limiting me. So I don't really want
That
to,
happens. Yeah.
I don't want
Don't
to
want to
promote
shout them
them.
out.
because
That's
I'm
fair.
because I'm only allowed to bet $1 there now. So I don't want to say
Yeah.
it. Actually, you know what? Bet 99. They tended to have better same game parlay odds, and I took advantage of that. And now I can't bet there anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say FanDuel, DraftKings, the big ones aren't amazing. Bet365 tends to be a little better than those two.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the last takeaway here is to size your bets small enough. So if I'm going in with 100 units to use in the whole season, in a given night, I don't want all those units bet. And in a given game, I use my bets in a game tend to correlate with each other a little bit. So if I'm thinking that Austin Matthews is going to get a lot of shots and Toronto's going to get a lot of shots and Toronto might win, if I'm betting 5 different things that aren't parlayed together, they are all correlated. So you're kind of putting all those bets together in one event. So you want to make sure your bet sizing is small enough that you can handle big swings. In some nights, I went down 30 and 40 units and up 30 and 40 units. And so I was able to determine, like, okay, for my daily betting, I'm going to make my unit size a little smaller so that my 100 unit total really accounts for tonight what I want to bet. And so that was just a lesson I learned, because you want to survive those big swings.
For sure. Yeah, I think of interest to me, particularly of these takeaways, the shots on goal, we've seen a definite trend downwards in just shot attempts and shots on goal across the NHL the last few years. The shooting percentage jumped this year by a really significant margin, actually, compared to the last 4 years prior to it. And that's definitely something that I'm thinking about. And so it's interesting that it shows up here. I think it definitely makes sense that, I mean, to some extent, the more the more events that are happening, so the team shots on goal versus the individual player shots on goal, the more events that are happening, the more likely it feels like you should be able to predict it. And so you can get further away from, like, a line can be probably worse on a team save or team shots on goal than it might be on an individual player in a lot of cases. So that somewhat makes sense to me just on that basis. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's many different events that go into a team having a certain number of shots on goal, and that reduces the variance. When you're picking one player, um, you're taking a tiny sample out of a huge population of events that are occurring, and that just makes more variance. I do want to say that this last season, prior to this one, I had some success with shots on goal, and I think the downtrend in total shots on goal definitely made an impact on that this year, where the lines, but even just my process to predict that, myself and the books, I think we're predicting more individual shots on goal
Right.
for almost every player. And I didn't take enough unders, that's for sure.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right. Let's move over and talk about the season long takeaways.
Yeah. So I would say the boring bets really return a lot of value. For me, a lot of unders return values, such as Luke Hughes, under 53.5 points, McDavid under 51.5 goals. Even Matthias Michelli was a big one, under 20.5 goals. That's a boring one, but it was worth taking. Nuge under 82.5 points, Faber under 55.5 points. A lot of these might be boring, might be not as fun to follow as the season goes on, but I will share in my season long bets in terms of goals on overs. I returned 23% return on investment. On unders, I returned 51%. In terms of points on overs, I actually lost 6% return on investment on points, but on unders, I returned 42%. So for me, the unders were a lot more valuable than the overs this year. And then on that point, my second point here is that the plus money over plus 300 may have been a sweet spot for me, where I lost some money on lines that were in between plus 100 and plus 300. So just like the Matthews Rocket Richard at plus 140, that bets like that are where I lost money. But the OV 40 plus goals at plus 950, the Fantilli 30 plus goals at plus 1,000, Caulfield 40 plus goals, I think was up there. Those ones definitely returned a lot more money to me. Just a few big losses I had at plus money under 300. It was 30 plus goals for Genther. That got ruined by him missing some games. 30 plus goals for Lafreniere. 30 plus goals for McCann. 50 plus points for Novak. And 50 plus points for Will Smith. So a lot of these that, like maybe my projections are saying they could occur, but maybe I should be waiting for or picking those lines if they're a little higher in terms of the odds.
That's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, and then my last big takeaway is that closing line value is key on these season longs. Really pays off to be ready early when the lines drop. So last year they dropped around August 1st. A lot of the books dropped a lot of the over underlines, and I was able to really attack those early lines. So Tyler Toffoli, I had under 32.5 goals, and I saw him at 29.5 as a line, and he finished with 30, so that really mattered. Timo Meyer, he opened, I saw in one book at 51.5. I ended up getting on him at over 52.5, and I hit that because he finished with 53, and he finished at a 58.5 line on a lot of the books. So that was really important to get on that early. Martin Nichas moved from 25.5 to 27.5. He finished with 27. Panarin had a huge jump from 30 to 35, and Matvei Michkov had a big jump from 46 to 52. So a lot of these players, if you got there early and you logged on to those accounts right when they dropped all the lines, you would be able to take advantage of some incorrect lines there. So that was really key, and I'll definitely be ready this off season as soon as they drop the lines.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. If you are interested in doing it, have your projections, whatever you're using as your kind of baseline evaluation ready to go and be sitting ready when they do drop them. Yeah, for myself, I think I've kind of sprinkled in my little takeaways kind of throughout here. Nothing too crazy, but definitely one thing that I'm going to reevaluate for myself next year is just not dedicating so much to individual players. So, like when Timo Meyer has the season that he did, that sank, I think, 9 or 10 units I had total on Timo Meyer. Even though I hit on some of the Caulfield stuff, I also had a bunch of other stuff on him that didn't hit. And so, while it was a net positive, it wasn't as big as it maybe could have been if I had just sized down and or stuck to the ones that I was really confident in, or maybe even just more appropriately size the higher end bets, like the 80 plus points, for example. I put 2 units on that. Maybe that's a 1 unit bet in the future. So yeah, that's kind of my major takeaway is I want to spread it out a little bit more, not dedicate so much. Like to some extent, you can only take that so far because there are only going to be a limited number of players where you really do feel like you have an edge over the books on, right? And so you want to be in on those players, but maybe not to the extent that I was in on Timo Meyer this year.
I will say, I think there's more than you would think, more players than you would think that you might feel comfortable taking their lines.
Right.
Like I think I was on almost 100 players, I think, in
Okay.
terms of season long betting. And yeah, like I think for me, as a general rule for the season long bets, in terms of bet sizing, like I usually bet to return 1 unit, or and yeah, like that. So if it's a minus 150, bet 1.5 units and it'll return 1 unit. If it's
Mm-hmm.
a plus 1,000, bet 0.1 units and it'll return 1 unit.
Mm-hmm.
But from there, like work from there as a baseline, and then based on your confidence, like go outward. So I think my
Right.
plus money bets, my biggest one that was a little too much. I think I had 1.5 units on Eichel at plus 800, but in terms of like plus money over plus 300 even, I didn't have anything over 1.5 units, and that
Mm-hmm.
was probably a little too much anyway
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yep. Great point there. All right. Well, before we get out of here, Ryan, I will give you the floor. Plug everything you got going. Let the people know what they can expect to find from you moving forward through the off season as we get ready for next year.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, X, at Fantasy Cheddar. I am Top Cheddar Fantasy on there, and I have been releasing my own projections the last 2 seasons. Have done very well on that, and I'll continue to do so. So look out for those end of July. And I'll also be posting some interesting betting stuff. Might post my picks, and yeah, you can find me on Twitter there.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you made it this far, there's a link in the description for the Ups and Geos Discord community. Ryan's in there. I'm in there. We're talking about these bets throughout the season. People are posting some of the stuff they do on the daily as well. So you can get in there and talk to smart people about that. If you could, before you leave, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you're able to do for the podcast really does help us out. But that is going to be all that we've got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.